fold in a matter of years. Between 1940 and 1950, the city's black population increased more than any West Coast city other than Oakland and Frisco. It was part of a demographic change seen in cities across America as blacks left the South for the North and West in what became known as the Great Migration. We got to keep on moving. We got to keep on moving. Moving toward opportunity and moving toward change. Say Black Lives Matter. Say Black Lives Matter. With the Portland's black population undergoing a rapid expansion, city officials could no longer ignore the question of housing. There simply wasn't enough space in the red line neighborhoods for the incoming black workers. But even with the overwhelming influx of workers, Portland's discriminatory housing policies reigned supreme. Fearing that permanent housing development would encourage black workers to remain in Oregon after the war, the Housing Authority of Oregon, the Portland Housing Authority, sound familiar, was slow to act. Article in the Oregonian in 1942 with the headline, New Negroes, Migrants Worry City. I tell you, the city is afraid of black folk moving in power. I said the city's afraid of black people and white people coming together in unity to shift change in the landscape. This was back in 1942, and here we are in 2020 when white people and black people can stand in solidarity for systemic change. There's nothing we cannot accomplish by the grace of God. It's cited in the article, new black workers were taxing the housing facilities of Urbana District and confronting authorities with a new housing problem. Later that same year, Mayor of Portland, Earl Riley, asserted that Portland can absorb only a minimum number of Negroes without upsetting the city's regular life. It's time to disrupt some things, Portland. It's time to break up some things, Portland. It's time to reimagine what's possible. Diversity, equity, and inclusion on every level of policy. Affirmation is here for us to seize the moment. I'm almost through. Almost through. Seemingly overnight, Vanport, named because it was midway between Portland and Vancouver, Washington. Vanport became Oregon's second biggest city and the largest housing project in the country, heard Dre said earlier. Home to 40,000 workers at its peak, 6,000 of whom were black. Kaiser couldn't wait for the city to provide his workers with housing, so he went around officials to build his own temporary city with the help of the federal government. There it is, the feds, they showed up. Completed in just 110 days. It's amazing what can happen when you get support and how quick it can happen. Remain resilient, remain persistent, keep marching, keep protesting, keep organizing, keep on praying. You're going to make a substantial difference after a while. The year was 1948, had become particularly wet that year. Snowy winter had left the mountain snowpack bloated, and a warm, rainy May, combined with spring, melt to raise the level of the Columbia River to dangerous heights. Officials in Vanport began patrolling the dikes that day, but didn't issue any warnings to the Vanport residents. The United States Army Corps of Engineers had assured the Housing Authority of Portland that the dikes would hold and that Vanport would remain dry in the face of increasingly rising waters. Interesting. Still, the Housing Authority of Portland safeguarded its files and equipment, removing them from their offices in Vanport, along with some 600 horses from the adjacent racetrack behind us here. On May 30, Memorial Day, 1948, Vanport woke up to a flyer from the Housing Authority of Portland, which read, "Remember, dikes are safe at present. You will be warned if necessary. You will have time to leave." The dikes did not hold. At 4:17 p.m., a break came in a railroad dike that separated Vanport from Smith Lake along the city's northwest edge. What began as a small hole just 6 feet initially rapidly expanded until water was steadily streaming through a 500-foot gap in the dike. As water seeped into the city of Vanport, homes were swept away in the flood, their foundationless walls unable to withstand the force of the water. In less than a day, the nation's largest housing project, a mecca of black progress, business, ownership, education, in less than a half a day was destroyed. 18,500 residents were displaced, and roughly 6,300 were blacks. In Vanport, Ed Washington remembers and counting more racist remarks than as his childhood in Birmingham, Alabama. Wow. Simply because Birmingham, blacks and whites rarely interacted. In Vanport, it was an increased racial climate. Although there was a racial climate, there was yet integration. Whites and blacks working together. Vanport launched and hired the first black educators in the state of Oregon. Vanport hired the first black educators in the state of Oregon. Vanport hired the first black educators in the state of Oregon. Vanport was the first state in Oregon, city in Oregon, to hire black teachers. So why are we here today? What is the significance of us gathering in this moment as I come to and close? Oregon didn't want blacks to be here, but we're here. Portland didn't want us to remain here, but we're still here. The Portland Housing Authority wanted to restrict our ownership, but we've broken through. The flood tried to erase our history, but we're still here and we survived. Because we are here, I say because we are here, we must be concerned and we must be committed to elevate our voices and to mobilize like never before. We must be courageous and we must be determined that Oregon will change on our watch. Why don't you clap those hands and give God the glory in this open space?